anyways, talk about your casting process. Why did you both want to do The Amazing Race with each other?
All right, I'll start and let Patrick finish. So, Patrick had moved to California from Ohio, but we both started watching The Amazing Race when it first came on. So, we would not be able to watch it at the same time, but we were watching it. And he came home for a wedding a couple of years after that, and he said, "Let's audition." And so he convinced me that this would be a fun thing to do. It was last minute, and he was heading back to the airport. And my husband, his dad, did a video very quickly, and we dropped it at the post office, and here we are.
Yeah, so going into the race, obviously being big fans, what did you expect beforehand and how did that change like while running it?
What did I expect? Well, I never expected to get the call. So I thought this was a joke. I worked full time. I had a job, and never in my wildest dreams did I think that could happen. And so even after we got the first call, I actually got the first call sitting in an Applebee's restaurant having dinner. And the young man said, "This is Jared from The Amazing Race. Do you have time to talk?" And I said, "No, call me later," because I really thought it was Patrick. And so Patrick then called me and said, "Mom, did you get the call?"
Well, going into the race, you immediately form an alliance with Debbie and Bianca, and they kind of mentioned on the show, Patrick, you looked like one of their first boyfriends, but what was the real reason why you actually decided to align with them?
Honestly, it was probably because we had ridden with them in the helicopter to at the very beginning of the race. We were sitting across from them, and I remember there was a picture of all of the cast members, and and it had each person's name underneath it, and we didn't know anybody's names yet. And I was looking at their names, Debbie and Bianca, and they were sitting right across from me. And yeah, it was just kind of funny. We were making eye contact, and we kind of built an alliance in the helicopter as we were headed to the starting line. And then, so when we were finally allowed to talk to each other, it was like, oh, good, now we can actually talk and yeah, get to know each other.
Yeah, so going into the first leg, how cool is it doing that zip line? Because that looked really fun and you both looked like you had a good time.
Whoa. Well, I think at that point, you're kind of in a daze. It had been kind of a whirlwind by the time you take off, and we flew all the way to Lima, Peru, and get in the car. So I think they started with one of the bigger adventures there by putting us in that zip line. And then we just happened to be second in line. So you had very little time to think about it. But it was really, really cool.
I like when the race does that kind of stuff, like adventurous things. So I don't like when it's a task where it's just like tedious or it's not as fun to watch. I like back in the day, I think there were a lot more extreme
Yeah.
challenges than there are now.
So how hard was it hurting the llamas, or did you have an actual good llama like some other teams did?
It was difficult. Yeah. It was yeah, it was shown accurately on television, I think. That was a difficult challenge. They
Very
did not want to
difficult.
do what we wanted them to do. But I felt like we had enough time during that challenge to not that we weren't going to lose it by wasting the time there struggling.
And we didn't, I don't think we felt like we had an alternative. We had to do it if we struggled with them or not.
Yeah, she couldn't have carried that stuff.
No.
I mean, no offense, but we always had to pick the task that mom could actually have done.
So I gotta ask, you thought that you were in first place, you finished in second, which normally everybody would be celebrating because it's like, yeah, you finished second, you're not first eliminated. But how pissed were you when you figured out you lost 20 grand when you thought you were first? Because I would have been pissed.
Very,
She was. I honestly
very.
wasn't. All I cared about was not being last. And on that first leg, especially. So yes, the prize was great on that first leg, but it didn't matter as much to me, those first place wins.
But we really thought we were in first place. And just, oh, yeah, that hurt.
Yeah, so going into episode 2, you set the pace, finishing in second. So can you talk about going to the Virgin Mary statue and why you didn't have enough money and how difficult that was and maybe how that held you back in the leg?
So we had the money, but the paper money was torn, and they would not accept it. So it and that was not because we were on the race. That wasn't a rule. It was they would not take that paper money. And so, and then that's all we had. And I forget how much it was, but that's when we had to beg for money. And that's when Gretchen and Meredith were ahead of us. And they got on the funicular and away they went.
Yeah, I
So,
remember that being more about having to swap money than beg
yeah.
money because yeah, we had this torn money.
Why did you not like Rob and Amber? And what?
Oh, well, honestly, yeah. So that's the perspective that back in, this was season 7. So this was 2004 when this was all happening. Like, I honestly thought that's what the rest of the world would also think if they saw a reality couple like Rob and Amber come off of Survivor and then go up against a bunch of regular people. I thought, oh, they're going to root for the regular people, not Rob and Amber. But that wasn't the case, which is
Yeah.
so funny. But yeah, personally, I haven't watched Marquesas in forever, but I remember coming off that season and not liking Rob. And then I remember coming off of All Stars and not liking him. So that was really where it came from. It was just because I'm a fan of reality TV and I wasn't a big fan of him. So that was it. Oh, well, and then inside our own race, we ended up with our own reasons,
Yeah.
but
But in the beginning, it was funny though, the first day in the hotel, when we all went downstairs and you got to see who the teams were, Patrick said, Mom, there's Amber. And I thought, how the heck does he know somebody here? I didn't even know who they were. So that was just not an issue for me. And so from the beginning, Patrick was. And then Amber
she
was
had
somewhat
just
friendly.
won Survivor
Yeah.
though, like
Yeah.
2 or 3 months before that happened because we shot this in November of 2004. So I actually don't know if yeah, when the timing of that works out, but that had just happened. I remember Survivor All Stars.
So going into the detour fact of episode 2, why did you choose the getting ingredients when you literally ran out of money, like before you're going up the gondola, instead of like stacking the books? And how difficult was that doing that because you didn't have much money, or was it
Oh,
not that bad?
oh, because this was again the physical task always has to get tossed aside to the
Yeah.
for the puzzle or task or something like that. And so yeah, the stacking the books was going to be way too difficult with the two of us because we were just such small people. So we decided we'd have to do the carrying a giant fish around, and that's what ended up happening,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And we sort of friended Meredith and Gretchen too a little early on. And I don't know, we kind of went in the same directions.
So going into episode 3, you're in the back of the pack, and why was finding directions to the Andes like so bad for you guys? Because you seemed like you were kind of behind. I mean, not as bad as Debbie and Bianca, not realizing that a beach is nowhere near the mountains for 2 hours,
Mhm.
but why was it so difficult for you?
Well, getting out of Santiago, of course, this is back in the day, no cell phones, no maps, nothing. And we knew we had to go north, but it was very difficult to get out of Santiago. We actually spent almost 2 hours in the city just going around and around and around before we were able to get on Norte.
Cinco Norte. I think it's interesting. A recent episode of in a recent season of the race, they did the exact same thing that happened to us, where everybody was trying to get out of yeah, where was it, Mendoza or no,
It was
out of
Santiago.
Santiago, yeah.
Mhm.
And they were headed into the Andes and they got lost exactly the same way as in our season, which was like, wow, that's so funny how it replayed. But for us, I will say that's a major regret for me because when we were all leaving that morning, a lot of people were following each other. And I remember saying to mom specifically, let's not follow everybody today. Let's go our own way because we can figure this out. And we really should have just followed people to get out of the city at least. Sometimes
Yeah.
that does help.
Well, at least you didn't follow your alliance that time because that would have completely screwed you. So it
Good point.
wasn't
Yeah.
completely bad. But I want to talk, how bad was the whitewater rafting? Because we didn't really get to see it from your perspective because they were focusing on other teams. At least that's what I saw when I was watching it. And I remember the car seats, you were like, my arms are so tired and I can't stand being in boats. So what was that experience like for both of you?
Well, I think the whitewater rafting, it was another one of those moments that was sort of like a blur, almost like the zip line for me. It was scary, challenging, and over before I realized it. But it was, I forget what they called it, a level 7, maybe rapids, which was,
I don't remember.
yeah, pretty tough. So
I don't remember it. Yeah.
yeah, it was kind of a
I guess it
blur
was tough.
then. But that was also, I mean, we had driven and driven and driven to get there. It was hours getting across the mountain. And since then, we've gone back to Argentina and I've done that trip again. I didn't drive it, but those curvy roads and over the hill. And by the time we got down the hill or the mountain, that's when we realized, oh no, there's something coming up here. And I was exhausted.
I think it's interesting too, that whole trip through the Andes that day, they send you to so many different checkpoints to get different clues that never aired on the show. And so I wonder if they still do that on the show or not. But back then, there were a lot of times that happened, like that you were like, oh, they never showed that checkpoint at that lake in the mountains, or something. But yeah,
Yeah,
so we were constantly thinking you were showing up at a challenge, but you weren't really. You were just getting a clue that says keep driving to the next thing. And then you would only start to realize it when the sound person starts to put the device inside a condom, because then you're like, oh crap, we're about to get wet because they're wrapping our stuff up. But yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. They sometimes do that, but I don't think they do it as often now. Um, but I gotta ask, so Susan, you're eating that beef jerky in the car and it like sort of then next time you have an eating challenge. So Patrick, how awful was that food challenge and what did you want to say when your mom was like, just vomit? Because I was talking to my mom about that. I was like, I probably would have like yelled at her, and I don't think I would take it well when you have to eat like 6 pounds of disgusting raw meat.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually, those are the moments that I actually enjoy the most about the race now, all these years later, because they capture the funniest things. It's like, how often does your mom actually yell at you, vomit, just vomit? It's like, wow, you never get put in that situation. So that's pretty funny. Uh, it was really tough. Also, what I think is funny about that whole challenge is that it's not portrayed exactly how it happened, because I had taken the penalty as well as everyone else, the 4 hour penalty. So the whole time that I was sitting there, I was gambling on the fact that once Debbie and Bianca showed up, they wouldn't be able to actually eat it because they were vegetarian. She was a vegetarian, Bianca or Debbie. And so I thought, if Debbie does it, she's a vegetarian, she won't be able to actually eat this. It'll take her longer than 4 hours. I can get through this without even having to eat this stuff. So I was sitting there faking it actually, and being so that Debbie would actually, be faked out. But once she started actually eating it, I realized I actually had to eat it as well. So then I just started having to cram it down my throat.
So
Yeah.
did you actually finish, or did you take?
No, I actually finished. So what had happened was, earlier I had eaten about half of it. And then I said, I can't do any more of it. And so then I said, I'll just wait. I'll take the penalty. And whenever Debbie and Bianca showed up, my penalty started. And so they showed up and my 4 hour clock started. So I had to just sit there and keep going, I can't do it. I can't do it. And they were like, yeah, he can't do it. But they were just eating really slowly. But then it started looking like, okay, wait a second, Patrick, you got to eat this. So
I'm
I,
shocked they let you do that. I thought that would be against the rules. Like once you take a penalty, you take a penalty. The fact that they let you do that is kind of shocking.
that whole evening became crazy. That whole penalty situation. Yeah, that people were just supposed to be coming in and out of that challenge fast. And they ended up setting up the cameras for like 12 hours, I guess, to just shoot because, yeah, nobody was going anywhere. People were just sitting there.
But once you start back, you can't stop again. So you can't go back.
Well, I could have. They would have just, it would
Oh,
have
we would
mattered.
have, yeah, we would have lost. But
Yeah,
Yeah,
so how close were actually Debbie and Bianca then to you? Because they looked like they were literally like only a couple minutes behind from
They
you.
were very close. Yeah.
they were close, but I would say
Half hour.
half hour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I
I
guess
would
that's
say
the
a half
power of
hour.
editing. They're good. Well, and during the dark, you can't really see, like, you can't really
Yeah,
tell like what the placements are unless it goes from like light to dark,
yeah.
weather-wise. But going into episode 4, can you describe how awful that horse roadblock was for you, Patrick? Because on a couple people, like when I spoke to Dina about it, she was like, it was terrible. It kept bucking me off. I had like a giant rash under it for like a couple days. So how
uh,
was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the worst part, I guess, was just like I think it was like the spurs or something, just kept bashing my ankles the whole time because I didn't fit into the feet or whatever
Stirrups.
stirrups. Yeah,
Mhm.
but you know what? It really, I don't remember it being all that bad. It just was really difficult. It was so
Mhm.
difficult getting it done in the time amount. Yeah, that was required. Oh, it was really frustrating too because I just had never ridden a horse like that.
Well, what was more frustrating for you is the fact that they didn't have an equalizer and the fact that the 3 teams were in the back of the pack for that leg. So that
Yeah.
completely screwed you up. But I gotta ask, as far as your team dynamic, Susan, we're very like optimistic, like we're never gonna give up, like no matter what happens, like we're totally fine. Like I don't care if in your mind you probably thought, I don't care if I have to drag Patrick's body like weekend for Bernie's or get it on that mat. And Patrick, you seem very like pessimistic, like as far as like we're screwed. Do you think that attitude maybe affected your placements, or did that affect like the way you ran the race in any kind of way?
Don't think it. Well, I guess yeah, I don't think that it affected the way that we ran the race. I think it was just sort of the way we portrayed ourselves to the production,
Mhm.
as it was like our agreement almost. I feel like because it was like this is what we signed up for when we were going through casting. We were calling myself pessimistic Patrick and like fair. We were calling ourselves fair and imbalanced. And so we said to them, "This is what you're going to get." And so I was totally willing to be that portrayed that way. It didn't matter to me, but I also felt like it was realistic. This was unlike something like Survivor, where I feel like I have more control over my destiny by voting people out. The race is a lot of luck, and I don't think people give enough credit to the amount of luck that's in that. And so I put a lot of credit into luck. And so, yeah, I'm realistic about it.
So I gotta ask, how frustrating was it when your boat broke down in I think you were in Argentina? Because when I spoke to Dina, she actually gave me some tea, and I don't know if you guys knew this. She paid a guy to tell them like where to go so that they could get ahead. So
Ah,
what happened with your boat? And like, did you even try doing something about that and try breaking the rules a little bit?
no, we did not try breaking the rules. I think I think we were doing okay. It was just once the boat died, we felt so helpless and angry. And then they said, we have to go get another boat. And we knew we were not up front. So we knew that we were toward the end. And I think that's where I just kept being hopeful. Patrick was done. I'm ready. Let's quit. I went out of here. So yeah.
Well, no, there was the walkie-talkies of the people
Oh,
in our boat where you could hear the people checking in at the pit stop. So
yeah.
the it was very real that we were at the end and that everyone had checked in and we were just left there and there was nobody coming to help us. And so it was just like, okay, this is the end of our race out here. And I also felt in that moment, and I don't know how true this could be, but it's like, yeah, it is good TV to have one boat that doesn't work, that's gonna die out there. That would be good television, wouldn't it? So there was an element of, yeah, this sucks for us, but whatever.
How pissed were you the next leg when you figured out it was a non-elimination when you were in sequester?
Oh yeah, I guess that. Well, I was more pissed that it was Africa because I really wanted to go to Africa. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it should have been a non-elimination. Yeah, that leg really.
What did you take away from the race, like overall?
Oh, wow. Well, like we said at the elimination, it's um, $1 million worth of memories. And of course, it has been. I mean, we've relived it over and over again. So it's an experience that, well, we would never have again in our life. And so it was unbelievable. It was fun. It didn't end at the end of the race. I mean, we obviously spent a couple of weeks in sequester and enjoyed the relationships with the other teams. And then, once we came back, it was just really fun sharing it with our friends and family. And
Yeah, I would say it's interesting because like overall the experience was just like a month of our lives, in 2004, but it's something that is still constantly coming up, which is just really funny because I would
yeah,
never have thought 20 years later, oh my God, I'm still going to be talking about this, or it still pops up here and there.
I feel like I could, like Kelly McCorkle, I could um, send her a text anytime and she would know who I am and we could pick right back up. So I just feel like, yeah, made sort of lifelong friends that you don't see often, if ever again, but it was cool.
So my last question is, you were actually featured on the Amazing Race All Stars with a letter to Robin Amber. Was that cool, or are you more disappointed that you weren't asked back?
Oh, that was
Well,
disappointing because yeah, we did go through
we,
the process to go back to be
yeah,
on the All-Star season, but then we weren't picked. But they said, but instead of being on, you could write a letter to your friends who are going to be on. So that's when we got to write to Uchenna and Joyce. And I'm not even sure why they would have put us on the All-Star season because we got eliminated so early, but they totally asked us and put
yeah.
us through the process again for, was that season 11? But yeah, we didn't end up clearly being on the season. But that was a lot of fun to write that letter and to have a little bit of influence on that episode.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you were an All-Stars because I've spoken to a lot of alternates from that season. I've spoken to at least five of them. Like Meredith and Gretchen were slated.
Yeah.
Yep,
They couldn't because I think Meredith like had a hip injury or something or some sort.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they said, yeah, we're done after this. We did if I do it again if I hadn't already done it once, was what I remember them saying, because we were calling them at the same time. Did you get that call? Yep, they got the call too. It was so funny back then.
Yeah, the worst is this one girl team from season one. It was a mother and daughter. They ended up actually being slated on, but then they got replaced by the beauty queens from the season prior.
Yeah.
They were so
Mhm.
pissed.
Yeah, I loved them from the first
Yeah.
season. Yeah.